When Officer Cooper humiliated a black girl for jaywalking, he didn't know she was the mayor's daughter. This encounter would mark the beginning of a scandal that would shake the entire city. The events that followed would surprise even the most jaded observers. But let's start from the very beginning. Lillian Williams was briskly crossing a busy intersection, trying to get home before nightfall. Distracted by thoughts of her upcoming internship and coursework, she barely noticed when she stepped off the curb against the red light. Cars sped by as she quickened her pace. "Hey you! Get back on the sidewalk!" A loud voice barked behind her. Lillian turned to see a white officer in uniform standing by a patrol car. His face was twisted in irritation. "Don't you know the rules? Or do you think they don't apply to you?" he continued, striding toward her. "I'm sorry, officer," Lillian began, trying to explain. "I didn't notice the light." "Didn't notice, huh?" he mocked, folding his arms across his chest. "That's no excuse. Do you have any ID?" "I left my ID at home. I was just coming from school." Lillian trailed off as she felt the eyes of passers-by turning toward her. A few people had already taken out their phones to record the scene. Noticing the growing attention, Officer Cooper escalated the situation further. He pointed to the patrol car. "Then I guess I'll have to take you to the station to teach you the rules of crossing the street." "That's unnecessary, officer," Lillian said, keeping her composure, though her voice trembled slightly. "You're overstepping your authority." "Who do you think you are to tell me what I can or can't do?" Cooper snapped. "Do you think you're better than everyone else?" The murmurs from the small crowd grew louder. "What did she even do?" someone asked. Lillian glanced around and noticed several people filming the interaction. One man shouted out, "Officer, she just crossed the street. Are you serious?" Cooper ignored him. His voice grew even louder. "You broke the law. It's my duty to keep things in order." Lillian fought back tears as she noticed another police car approaching in the distance. At that moment, she realized this wasn't just a minor argument. It was spiraling into something much bigger than she could have anticipated. When the second patrol car pulled up, 2 more officers stepped out. Lillian could feel the tension thickening. One of them, a young black officer named Derek, immediately noticed the crowd's focus and the cameras aimed at their every move. He cast a quick glance at Cooper. "What's going on here?" Derek asked calmly. "Jaywalking," Cooper snapped curtly, barely hiding his irritation. "She refused to show ID and is resisting. I think we need to bring her in." "I'm not resisting," Lillian said firmly. "You're violating my rights." Cooper smirked and turned to Derek. "Looks like you're trying to be the sympathetic one here, but that only leads to anarchy. If we don't strictly enforce the law, tomorrow there'll be chaos." Derek raised a hand, gesturing for Cooper to calm down. "Let's think this through rationally," Derek said, assessing the situation. "She jaywalked. That's a minor infraction, not something worth escalating into this." But Cooper, clearly irked, raised his voice. "Are you going to tell me how to do my job? I've been on this force longer than you've been wearing that uniform." The onlookers began shouting, "Let her go! She didn't do anything!" Cameras continued to capture every second, and someone in the crowd had already started live streaming the scene. Lillian tried again to explain. "I'm Lillian Williams. I'm not a threat. You're abusing your authority." Hearing her last name, Derek frowned. Something about it made him cautious, but Cooper ignored it entirely. Turning back to Lillian, he reached for his handcuffs. "We'll sort out your identity at the station," Cooper said. "Officer, wait!" Derek interjected, trying to intervene. "Are you sure this is necessary? Look at the crowd. This is becoming something bigger than a simple jaywalking incident." Cooper shot Derek an angry glare. "Do your job, or I'll handle this myself." At that moment, someone in the crowd shouted loudly, "She's the mayor's daughter! Do you even know what you're doing?" Cooper froze, disbelief flashing across his face. Lillian stood tall, her head held high despite the anxiety in her eyes. The crowd began murmuring, and Cooper's confidence visibly wavered. Derek stepped forward, placing a hand on Cooper's shoulder. "We need to de-escalate," Derek said firmly. This isn't the time or place to flex authority. But Cooper, his face flushed with anger, clung stubbornly to his position. The cameras kept rolling, and the situation teetered on the edge of spiraling out of control. The crowd grew louder, and Cooper realized he was losing control of the situation. His face contorted with a mixture of rage and uncertainty. "Mayor's daughter?" he muttered, shooting a quick glance at Lillian. "This has to be some kind of trick. Anyone can say that." Lillian, suppressing her anger, responded firmly. "Yes, I am the daughter of Mayor Marcus Williams, and you just publicly humiliated me for no reason." Cooper's face reddened, but he tried to maintain his tough stance. "The law is the law, Miss Williams. Your last name doesn't give you the right to break the rules." From the crowd, shouts rang out. "City Hall already knows." "You're done, buddy," someone yelled loudly. "The video's online. Someone call his department." Officer Derek tried again to intervene, this time with a more forceful tone. "Cooper, stop. We're creating an unnecessary problem here. If she really is the mayor's daughter, the fallout from this will be huge." But Cooper ignored him, turning back to the crowd and trying to assert control. "This is standard procedure. Everyone will be questioned, and the matter will be resolved. Disperse immediately." No one moved. Phones stayed pointed at him. Live streams continued, and voices accused Cooper of bias and abuse of power. Suddenly, a stern voice came over the police radio, amplified through the patrol car's speaker system. "Cooper, stand down. We've received reports about the situation. Do not touch the girl. Await my arrival." Cooper, visibly shaken, lowered the handcuffs and stepped back. Lillian stood her ground, her posture commanding even more attention from the crowd. Minutes later, a black car with flashing lights pulled up to the scene. Out stepped the chief of police, Mr. Hale. His eyes immediately found Lillian. "Lillian, are you all right?" he asked, extending a hand toward her. "I am," she replied calmly. "But I demand an explanation. This is unacceptable." Hale nodded gravely and turned to Cooper. "Do you have any idea what you've just done? You detained her without cause and overstepped your authority. The footage is already online, and this is now a matter for internal affairs." Cooper's confidence evaporated as his face turned pale. "But I was just doing my job," he stammered. Hale's voice grew colder. "Your behavior is not doing your job. It's a disgrace. Hand over your badge and gun immediately, or I'll suspend you on the spot." The crowd erupted into applause. Cooper, now speechless, retreated to the patrol car without another word. Lillian finally felt a wave of relief wash over her, though she knew the situation wasn't over. Her father was surely on his way, and the real reckoning was just beginning. A few minutes later, a sleek black official car pulled up to the scene. Mayor Marcus Williams stepped out, carrying himself like a man accustomed to handling crises, though his expression betrayed concern. The crowd parted to let him through to his daughter. "Lillian, are you okay?" His voice was calm, but his eyes were filled with worry. "I'm fine, Dad," she replied steadily. "But we need to talk about this. His behavior was unacceptable." The mayor turned to Police Chief Hale. "I want to know how something like this could happen," he began, his tone firm. "This officer humiliated my daughter, and dozens of people witnessed it." Hale, composed but tense, nodded. "We've already initiated an internal investigation. Officer Cooper has been temporarily suspended, and his actions will be reviewed by the disciplinary board." The crowd erupted in applause, with some shouting, "Justice will be served!" and others calling out, "This was blatant racism!" Marcus raised his hand, signaling for silence. "What happened today is not just about my daughter," he said, his voice carrying authority and conviction. "It's a symptom of a deeper issue. We will work to ensure that this never happens again to anyone." The crowd hummed in agreement, and the cameras kept rolling, capturing every word. Lillian looked at her father with admiration, knowing he would seize this moment to drive meaningful change. The next day, footage of the incident went viral, garnering millions of views. Headlines blared phrases like, "Officer humiliates mayor's daughter. What does this say about the system?" and public outrage leads to immediate suspension. Lillian hadn't expected to be thrust into the spotlight, but she chose to embrace it. In an interview with local news, she stated, "This didn't just happen to me. Every day, people face bias and injustice. We need to demand change. I'm committed to working on this with my father and his team." Officer Cooper was summoned to a disciplinary hearing. His actions were deemed unethical and an abuse of power. He was dismissed from the force and publicly reprimanded. Meanwhile, Marcus Williams announced a series of police reforms, including mandatory bias training and improved accountability measures. Regular meetings with local activists became a cornerstone of his administration, as the mayor called for unity and systemic change. For Lillian, the incident became a lesson in resilience. She continued her studies, but also took an active role in the city's reform discussions. The events of that evening not only transformed her, but also galvanized the city, proving that even a single incident could spark significant change.